Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues episode 105. Ignore the politics because Vermont itself is actually not as far left as a lot of people speculate. Now, I've lived in several areas of Vermont. Of course, I went to UVM, so I was in sort of hippie-trippy University of Vermont and hippie-trippy Burlington. I lived on the eastern side, the southeastern region of Vermont, which is arguably the most liberal part of the state, actually. Like, more so than Burlington. Burlington's, like, hippie-trippy on drugs, and, like, there's some social justice warriors that go to UVM, most of which are from out of state. But for the most part, the liberalness that you get here is, like, a French-style, almost laissez-faire liberalism of a bunch of, like, wine swillers that want to go and make modern art. And they live in some little cottage out in the Woodstock area, or they have a second home in Quechee, and they're from a big city. They're big city liberal with no real power. Here in like Rutland, we're the swing state region of the state, and then up in the Northeast Kingdom, it's more red. But that's the political structure. Socially, culturally speaking, old-time Vermont was rock-ribbed conservative, like old farmer dudes. It would be almost undifferentiated from like maybe modern-day rural Kansas or something. New Wave Vermont, like in the post-yuppie era, is like Clintonian neoliberal. It's not really socially progressive, except on some issues, like on the equal rights stances and on the drug war, very progressive. Outside of that, you don't get the kind of haranguing that you get in California. You don't get the same, you don't get the anti-gun mentality of maybe a Maryland or some other nanny state. Now, you have a big tax liberalism here, but it's fiscal liberalism. It has nothing to do with social programs. It has to do with, hey, we're going to, provide welfare and, good education, basically. The latter of which is fine, for the most part, the former of which has begun to break down because we no longer have any ability to tax people more. We no longer have any able way to pay for aging infrastructure as the state's population ages, which means we're beginning to have some fiscal problems in this state, really. It's just a little bit of an issue that everyone in Montpelier wants to avoid talking about. They want to kick the can down the road the same way DC does. But Vermont is not hyper-liberal in the socially progressive sense. On gay rights, we certainly were. We were the first state to have civil unions. We were also the first state to have gay marriage without the courts getting involved and saying, hey, you've got to have gay marriage because legal reasons due to legal challenge. No, we did it in a legislative fashion. Our state never had slavery. We abolished it before we joined the Union, actually. We were the first state, by the way, to join the Union after the original 13 had already formed into the United States. We were a republic for a year before that, actually. Had our own flag and everything, which is pretty funny. Some would argue we probably should have stayed our own republic. Maybe things would have turned out a little bit differently. But, Vermont, it's not far left in the Berkeley sense. Berkeley, the birthplace of free speech, is also now the place where free speech has gone, basically, to die. We don't have that problem. Nobody up here is a stickler when it comes to the politically correct stuff. Like, you don't really get that, like, people here in Vermont, culturally, for the most part, like, they won't go out of their way to be like an asshole to another person based on their ideology or their status or something like that, but they will crack jokes about them and wouldn't, generally understand why people would be upset at it. There's a reason why Discuss and some of these other sites that were doing, I think it was Mashable was involved, they were doing some study and they said, oh yeah, comments from Vermont are the most trolly of all the comments in the United States. Well, there's a reason for that. It's cultural. It's part of the Vermont culture. Online, no Vermonter is going to care whether you get offended. In real life, like mostly people here leave each other alone. It's part of that sort of pan-New England-ish culture. The old-time Vermont-ness seeps in even to the new generations. That's a good thing, by the way. Helps keep the crime rate low. People are very polite in real life, unless they get, like, wasted or something. Opiate epidemic, of course, becoming a problem. But online, yeah, you're gonna get Vermontized, which means you're gonna get insulted. A case in point, for a long time, I was basically just an internet troll. I didn't really take analyzing things seriously. Now I do, but before it was all about just basically having a good chuckle and pissing other people off. And I'm still, by the way, overjoyed that there are people that are upset at my content. Like, they're like, oh yeah, but Styx has 666 in the username. I find that funny. Sticks, you're wrong on such and such an issue. Like, how can you how can you be pro-choice while also being anti-leftist in general? And I'm sitting there like roaring with laughter because people get confused because they're stuck in their little categories. Vermont is harder to categorize. Like, you can call us a democratic state for voting purposes, but we've got a Republican governor. How do you reconcile the two? It becomes a little bit difficult for people in hyper-partisan parts of the country that don't have that. They come from New York City, or they come from the middle of buttfuck nowhere in Wyoming. They would never be able to comprehend how our culture, I think, can be structured along such lines. That's about all. Peace out.